Three bulky cargo haulers shuddered as their hull plates slid back like the scales of a waking predator. Hidden beneath the rusted exterior, rows of high-velocity railguns extended, locking their sights directly onto the pirate captain's throat. 1,000 years of peace was about to end in 8 minutes of slaughter. I've watched empires rise and fall, but never like this. If you want to see the rest of this cosmic shift, subscribe to our chronicles. Now, let's see how a species meant for the scrap heap found its teeth. 8 months earlier, the air in the Great Rotunda had been thick with the smell of ozone and the heavy, rhythmic clicking of the carapace swarm's mandibles. Arch-Exarch Krell stood on the central dais, his chitinous armor gleaming under the artificial suns, while Lyra Thorne stood alone in the human delegation circle. She looked small, almost fragile, against the backdrop of the Astrum Covenant's unified might. The Accord of Silence was not a treaty. It was a sentence. Humanity was to be disarmed, their fleet dismantled, and their reach limited to the slow crawl of industrial freighters. Krell's voice had vibrated through the floorboards as he cited the human fleet's unorthodox tactics near the Orion Spur as proof of their inherent instability. In truth, the Covenant was afraid. They had seen 50 human scouts dismantle 2 dreadnoughts with nothing but gravity slings and mining lasers. Lyra didn't argue. She didn't plead. She simply bowed her head, her face a mask of calm acceptance that I, watching from the scribe's station, found deeply unsettling. The dismantling began at the iron rings of Saturn. I was sent there as an observer to ensure compliance. I watched as heavy-duty plasma cutters sparked against the hulls of the great Terran warships, carving them into manageable chunks of slag. Lyra Thorne was there frequently, often holding a small, handheld plasma cutter herself, its blue flame a tiny star in the dark. She would run the tool along the seams of her own flagship, the metal groaning as it surrendered. The law forbade the weapon, but it forgot to forbid the tools that build it. As the warships died, the industrial expansion began. The humans claimed they needed more resources to offset the loss of their military economy. Huge, boxy vessels began to emerge from the lunar docks, ships like the Vanguard. They were ugly, lumbering things designed for heavy mining and asteroid hauling. When I boarded the Vanguard for its initial inspection, I saw nothing but massive internal fabrication bays and rows of automated assembly arms. For refining or on the go, the human engineer had told me, his eyes crinkling in a way I now realize was a suppressed grin. I recorded it as a standard industrial feature. I saw no guns. I saw no missiles. I saw only a ship that could build other things. 3 months into the new era, the human sector felt strangely quiet. The Covenant ships stopped patrolling the borders, convinced the Terran problem had been solved. We watched the humans push further into the deep belts, their heavy haulers moving in slow, predictable patterns. They were a species that had been cut to the roots, but we forgot that roots grow in the dark. Have you ever wondered if the person you're watching is actually watching you back? Subscribe to join our crew as we peel back the layers of this deception. The silence was broken when the Void Reaper pirates, sensing a sector without teeth, descended upon the colony of Ethelgard. They expected a slaughter. They expected the humans to cower behind their diplomatic papers. Instead, they found the Vanguard and 2 sister ships waiting in the nebula. The pirates moved with the arrogance of those who know no one is coming to stop them. Their fleet, a jagged collection of stolen cruisers and spiked frigates, burned through the atmosphere of Ethelgard like a fever. I watched from the observation deck of a distant Covenant relay, certain I was about to witness the final erasure of the human spirit. But the Vanguard did not flee. It didn't even hail for mercy. The ship simply began to change. Those massive internal fabrication bays I had inspected weren't for refining they were a modular heart, pumping out prefabricated weapon mounts that locked into place with a sound like a closing vault. The external hull plates didn't just slide. They reconfigured, shedding their boxy industrial skin to reveal the sleek, heat-resistant alloy of a predator. Within minutes, the lumbering mining vessel had become a mobile fortress. The sister ships followed suit, their cargo holds spitting out swarms of drones that didn't mine asteroids, but rather bored through pirate shielding with terrifying precision. 50 ships had arrived for a slaughter. 8 minutes later, only scrap remained, tumbling through the silent dark of the Ethelgard orbit. When the news reached the Great Rotunda, the silence was absolute. Arch-Exarch Krell was no longer clicking his mandibles in triumph. He looked at the footage of the transformation with a tremor in his primary limbs. He immediately mobilized a Covenant armada, a wall of gold and silver steel intended to crush the Terran deception before it could spread. We arrived at the edge of the Sol system expecting a few rogue shifters. Instead, we found a horizon of commerce. Thousands of ships, miners, haulers, refuelers, and deep space tugs sat in a loose, peaceful formation near Earth's moon. They were civilian by every law we had written. Lyra Thorne's voice came over the wideband frequency, calm and steady. She didn't sound like a conqueror. She sounded like a neighbor who had just finished a very long day of work. She reminded the Exarch that every ship he saw followed the letter of the Accord. They were industrial vessels. They were tools of trade. Then, as one, every ship in that massive fleet cycled their hull plates. The scrapers revealed railguns. The tugs revealed missile pods. The fuelers shifted to reveal high-yield thermal cannons. It was a forest of steel, and we were finally seeing the roots. The law forbade the weapon, Lyra said, her image flickering on our view screen as she toyed with a small, handheld plasma cutter. But it forgot to forbid the tools that build it. We didn't destroy our teeth. We just learned how to hide them behind a smile. Krell didn't fire. He couldn't. To engage would be to invite the total economic and military collapse of the galaxy. If every human freighter was a warship in waiting, the Covenant was already surrounded. The negotiations that followed were swift. The Accord of Silence was shredded, replaced by a full membership pact that treated humanity as an equal. The shifters remained, a permanent fleet of dual-purpose vessels that served as a reminder of what happens when you try to cage a species that defines itself by its ability to adapt. Months later, I saw Lyra Thorne one last time at a diplomatic gala. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She held that same small plasma cutter, now deactivated and mounted on a base of polished wood as a desk ornament. It no longer represented the destruction of their fleet. It was the tool that had built their freedom. She caught me staring and gave a small, knowing nod. The galaxy was at peace, but it was a different kind of peace, one born of respect rather than restriction. The humans were no longer the newcomers being told where to sit. They were the architects of the new order, standing tall among the stars they had earned. The small tool sat on the table, its blue flame long extinguished, reflecting the light of a dozen different suns. What would you sacrifice to stay free in a galaxy that wants you silent? Subscribe and tell us if you think the humans went too far, or if the next story will show us an even deeper secret.